All right, get ready, everyone, because today we are diving deep into what's been happening in Spain.
Yeah, today we've got a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything, that's right. And especially for those of you listening from outside Spain, we've got some interesting stories for you today.
We do.
We've got 3 articles we're going to be looking at. One's all about, well, kind of a wild storm that just recently swept across Spain. We'll talk about the effects of that. Also, Spain's private healthcare system is going through a little bit of a rough patch, it seems.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we've got, well, some interesting political maneuvering that's going on.
Always.
Of course, always. All right, so let's start with this Herminia storm. This was not just any ordinary storm. It sounds like it was
Oh, a big one.
a big one. Yeah, it was a big one. I mean, weather warnings across almost the entire country.
Yeah, the entire country. Yep.
Practically the entire country. It says here, everything except for Navarra and the Canary Islands was on alert.
Wow.
And get this, Galicia got hit with a red alert,
Oh, wow.
12-meter waves.
That's a serious storm surge.
That's a serious storm surge. That's like, what? More than a 2-story house.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And it sounds like those waves caused some serious problems.
Yeah, and you think about those kinds of waves crashing on the coast. That's 589 incidents in Galicia alone.
589. What kind of incidents are we talking?
We're talking canceled flights, trains canceled, trees down everywhere. And the article even mentions that wind speeds were clocked at 162 kilometers per hour in Sidera.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, this was
That's a
a
serious
storm.
A serious storm. That's incredible. And it sounds like even now, days later, the article says train service between Ferrol and A Coruña is still not running.
Oh, wow, still down.
Still down, yeah. That's really, it makes you realize the power of nature.
It does, it does.
So I'm curious, has Spain seen any storms of this magnitude recently?
You know, Spain, where it's located, kind of makes it susceptible to storms coming in off the Atlantic. And especially that Bay of Biscay area is very well known for rough seas and unpredictable weather.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting you bring that up. I think it leads to a bigger question about how prepared is Spain to deal with these big storms?
Yeah.
You know, with climate change and the potential for these storms to become even more intense in the future, how are they, keeping their coastal defenses up to date, and just in general, are they getting ready for this kind of thing?
That's a really good point. And what kind of, I guess, what kind of lasting effects are we talking about from a storm like this?
Well, one of the main things is coastal erosion. Those powerful waves, they really can reshape the coastline, and that puts beaches and homes, even businesses that are along the coast, at risk.
Yeah.
And then also you have to think about the potential for flooding,
Of course.
damage to infrastructure.
Yep.
And it also disrupts things like agriculture, tourism,
Right.
and it all kind of adds up over time.
Right, it all adds up. So we've got this intense storm on one hand, and then on the other hand, we have, well, it seems like Spain's healthcare system is facing some pretty big challenges of its own.
Yeah, it's a different kind of storm brewing over there.
That's right, it's a different kind of storm. And it's interesting because it really shows how complex this whole mix of public and private healthcare can be in Spain.
It does.
We're talking about Muface, right?
Yeah, Muface. It's the public healthcare provider, but it's just for civil servants.
Right, so it's like its own separate insurance system just for government workers.
Essentially, yeah.
But the problem is, now it seems like some of the big insurance companies, like it mentions Adislas and DKV, they're refusing to renew their contracts with Muface.
Yeah, they're saying Muface isn't giving them enough money, basically.
Yeah, they're saying they're not getting paid enough to cover the cost of care.
Right, exactly. And you can kind of understand where they're coming from, but it's a tough situation for everybody involved.
It is. And I mean, what happens then? If these private providers start pulling out of the system, won't that put a huge strain on the public hospitals and clinics?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, 25.8% of the population relies on private health insurance in Spain. That's 12.4 million people.
Wow.
So if all those people suddenly have to rely on the public system, that's a huge burden.
Yeah.
And it could lead to even longer wait times and maybe fewer options for patients.
Right, yeah. And is the public system even equipped to handle that kind of influx?
Well, that's a good question, and it's something that a lot of people are concerned about.
Yeah.
I mean, to really understand this, we need to look at the history of of private healthcare in Spain and how it works with the public system.
Right.
It's not just about, wealthy people wanting private care. A lot of middle-class Spaniards choose private insurance because they can get to see specialists quicker
Right.
or avoid those long wait times that sometimes happen in the public system. So this whole Muface issue really throws a wrench in that whole system.
It does. So it's not just about money then. It's about access,
Yeah.
quality of care.
Absolutely. And it's all happening at a time when healthcare costs are going up everywhere.
Of course, that's a global issue.
It is a global issue, and Spain's right in the middle of it, trying to figure out how to balance providing good care for everybody while dealing with the reality of the costs.
It's a tricky situation. This Muface thing could really change things up, I think.
Yeah, it could have big implications for sure.
Well, let's move on from healthcare for a minute and talk about politics, because it seems like things are getting interesting there as well.
Oh, yeah. Spanish politics, always a good time.
Always a good time. So this article focuses on the ruling PSOE party and Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez.
Yeah, and he had a bit of a setback recently.
He did.
That's got people talking.
It's
It could have some real ripple effects in the political world there.
So tell me a little bit more about that. What exactly happened?
All right, well, the article says that the Congress rejected 2 key decrees that Sanchez's government had proposed.
Okay.
And these decrees included things like increasing pensions and providing aid to people who are affected by the DNA.
And the DNA, for those who don't know, that's like a severe weather event in Spain, right?
Yeah, it's like a really intense localized storm system.
Okay.
It dumps tons of rain really quickly and can cause some serious flooding, especially along the coasts.
Right. So these decrees were aimed at helping people who are struggling, the vulnerable folks.
Yeah, exactly. But the opposition PP party, although they said they supported some of those measures, they ended up voting against the decrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're saying they want separate proposals instead.
So it's a political game then.
Well, you could definitely see it that way. I mean, the PP is trying to show their power, maybe score some political points. They're not against the ideas themselves, but they're forcing the PSOE to do things their way.
Right. It's like a power play.
Exactly. But Sanchez is not giving up easily. The article says he's determined to push these social measures through.
Oh, wow. So it's a standoff.
Yeah, it's setting up for a big showdown. And you have to remember that this defeat comes at a tricky time for the PSOE with elections coming up.
Right.
It makes them look a bit vulnerable.
It does.
And the PP is going to try to use that to their advantage.
So how big of a deal is this defeat for the PSOE? Could they lose power because of this?
It's hard to say for sure. To really understand what might happen, we have to look at the bigger picture of Spanish politics.
Okay.
So you've got the PSOE, who are generally seen as more progressive.
Right.
Then you have the PP, who are more conservative.
Yeah.
And then you've got parties like Vox gaining ground with a more nationalist right-wing stance.
Right. It's quite a mix.
It is. It's a very diverse political landscape, and this parliamentary defeat is going to fuel the debate about what direction Spain should take. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. And I think this is the good point to maybe take a step back and try to connect the dots between all of these different things that are happening in Spain right now.
Yeah.
We have this storm.
Right.
We have the healthcare issues.
Yeah.
We have the political drama.
It all paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it really seems like Spain is at a crossroads.
It does. It does.
Trying to figure out how to move forward.
Absolutely. I think it's a snapshot of a country dealing with a lot of challenges.
Right.
Both things happening within the country and things coming from outside.
Right.
So, for those of us watching from outside Spain, it's a good reminder that Spain is a very dynamic and complex place.
It is. It is. And that's what makes it so interesting to follow.
Absolutely.
It's never boring. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
And I'm sure our listeners are ready for more.
I'm sure they are.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve a little deeper into these stories, explore the nuances, and see what other interesting things we can uncover.
Stay tuned, everybody.
We'll be right back. All right, we're back and ready to dig a little deeper into these Spanish headlines. When we left off, we were talking about Muface and all the commotion it's causing in Spain's healthcare system.
Yeah, it's definitely a story that catches the attention of people living outside of Spain.
It does. Trying to understand how healthcare works in another country,
Yeah.
especially when it's a system as, unique as Spain's.
Oh, absolutely. It can be a bit of a puzzle.
It can. So let's try to untangle it a bit more. We talked about how insurance companies are backing out of these contracts with Muface, and they're blaming rising costs.
Right.
But what's the bigger picture here? What's happening economically that's leading to this?
Well, it's a lot of different things happening all at once. I mean, you have inflation, right? Global
Mm.
inflation that's driving up the price of just about everything, including healthcare. And then, we have all these advancements in medical technology, which is great. It's
Right.
great for patients, but it often comes with a high price tag.
Yeah.
And then, Spain also has an aging population,
Right.
which means there's just more demand for healthcare services in general.
So it sounds like it's not just a Spain problem.
No, not at all.
It sounds like healthcare systems all over the world are facing these same pressures.
Exactly. But I think this Muface situation really shows how these global pressures can kind of expose the weaknesses in a system like Spain's.
Okay.
A system that has this mix of public and private healthcare. I mean, if these private insurers continue to pull out, it could create a domino effect,
Yeah.
put even more pressure on the public system, and ultimately that could impact the quality of care for everybody.
It's a tough situation all around. I mean, the government is in a tough spot too, right? They're
Yeah.
trying to keep costs down, but they also have to make sure that civil servants,
Right.
which
Yeah.
are a pretty big voting bloc, have access to decent health care.
Exactly. And this all ties back to the political drama we were discussing earlier.
Right.
Remember that defeat that the PSOE suffered in Parliament?
Yeah.
Well, this whole healthcare controversy could become a big issue in the upcoming elections.
Of course.
The PP is they'll jump at any chance to point out the PSOE's weaknesses in handling this.
So it becomes about a lot more than just health care then.
Absolutely. It's about politics. It's about the elections. It's all connected.
It's all connected. That's what's so fascinating about these deep dives.
Yeah.
You really start to see how everything is interconnecting.
Yeah, how these seemingly separate issues all kind of feed into each other.
They do. Okay, let's take a little break from healthcare for a minute and go back to Storm Herminia.
Okay.
We talked about the immediate impact, all the damage and disruption it caused. But I'm curious about the long-term effects, especially on the environment.
Right.
Could this storm have some lasting consequences?
Yeah, that's a big question that scientists and environmentalists are looking at right now. One of the concerns is coastal erosion.
Yeah.
Those massive waves Herminia brought in, they could have significantly changed the coastline.
Yeah.
And that would impact, the beaches, the coastal communities, even the marine ecosystems.
I mean, those waves were huge, 12 meters.
Yeah, that's a lot of force.
It's a lot of force to contend with.
It is. And it's not just about the damage that happens right away. Coastal erosion is a process that happens over time, and a storm like Herminia can speed it up,
Oh, wow.
which could make those areas even more vulnerable to future storms and rising sea levels.
It's like a chain reaction then.
It is.
One event can trigger all these other consequences.
Precisely. And then, you have to think about the potential impact on agriculture. Those strong winds and heavy rains,
Right.
they can damage crops, disrupt planting cycles, cause soil erosion, and all of that can have a big impact on food production and prices in those areas.
So even a storm that mainly affects the coast can have these far-reaching effects.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we can't forget about tourism either, right?
Oh, of course not. Spain is a huge tourist destination, and if some of those popular coastal areas have been damaged, it could lead to fewer visitors, less revenue, and that would impact the economy.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is, and understanding those connections is really important for dealing with these kinds of events in the future, whether we're talking about storms, healthcare, politics.
Okay, so let's get back to politics for a bit. We were talking about that parliamentary defeat for the PSOE and the possibility of snap elections.
Yeah.
What does that mean for Spain?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but snap elections could really shake things up politically.
Right.
We have a multi-party system in Spain with all these different ideologies and priorities competing for power.
We've got the PSOE on the left, the PP on the right, and then parties like Vox that are more nationalist and populist.
Exactly. And this defeat for the PSOE could really embolden the PP and the other opposition parties,
Okay.
give them more leverage in setting the agenda.
Yeah.
And it puts more pressure on the PSOE to kind of regain their footing and show people what their vision for the future is.
So how might these different parties position themselves in this changing landscape? What are their key issues and priorities?
Well, I think the PP will probably try to take advantage of the PSOE's stumble, present themselves as the more stable and responsible option.
Right.
They'll likely focus on things like economic growth, traditional values, and a strong stance on national unity, especially with the whole debate about Catalan independence still going on.
Okay, and what about the PSOE? How do they regain the trust of the voters?
Well, they might focus on issues like social justice, climate change, and strengthening the social safety net.
Yeah.
They'll need to convince voters that they're the best choice to guide Spain through these uncertain times.
And then there's Vox.
Right.
They've been gaining ground by tapping into people's anxieties about immigration, cultural change, and a perceived loss of Spanish identity.
Exactly. So you've got this complex mix of issues and ideologies, and the possibility of snap elections just adds another layer of unpredictability.
Yeah, it does. Spanish politics always keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, especially for those of us watching from outside Spain.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. We've
Yeah.
been talking about the big picture, but I'm also interested in the human stories behind these headlines.
Right.
What are people in Spain saying about all of this?
That's a really important point. It's easy to get lost in the politics and the economics,
Yeah,
but ultimately, these events are affecting people's lives.
exactly. For example, what are people in Galicia saying about the aftermath of Storm Herminia?
Yeah.
Are they worried about the future, or are they showing that resilience that Spain is known for?
Right. That's a good question. And what about the healthcare workers who are dealing with this Muface issue?
Yeah.
How are they handling the uncertainty? How are they coping with the potential strain on the system?
These are the stories that really make these issues come alive.
They do.
It's not just about statistics and debates, it's about how real people are experiencing these events.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that our listeners appreciate, that deeper understanding of the human side of these stories.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive,
We have.
and I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear our final thoughts.
I'm sure they are.
So let's take a quick pause, gather our insights, and we'll be right back to wrap up this exploration of Spanish news.
Sounds good.
All right, we're back for the last part of our Spanish news deep dive. We've talked about storms, healthcare, and politics. It's been quite a ride.
It has. And I think, for our listeners outside Spain, it really shows how dynamic and complex the country is. There's so much more to it than just sunshine and siestas.
That's right. And I think the most fascinating thing is how all these different stories we've talked about are actually connected. They all kind of paint this picture of Spain at a crossroads, facing all these changes and trying to figure out what the future holds.
Yeah, you put it perfectly. I mean, you think about it, Storm Herminia shows how vulnerable the infrastructure can be and how important it is to adapt to climate change.
Right.
And then the whole Muface debate reveals all these tensions within the healthcare system and the economic pressures that it's facing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the political drama, well, that just highlights the divisions within the country and all the uncertainty surrounding the upcoming elections.
It's like each story is a piece of a puzzle. And when you put them all together, you start to see the bigger picture.
Exactly. And I think that interconnectedness is something that we often miss when we're just focusing on the day-to-day news.
Yeah, we get caught up in the individual events and we forget to look at the bigger picture.
Right. So what does all this mean for Spain going forward? What are the big takeaways from our deep dive?
Well, I think one thing is clear. Spain needs to be resilient and adaptable.
Absolutely.
Like a lot of countries, Spain is facing all these challenges: economic uncertainty, climate change, political polarization. And to deal with those challenges, it's going to take some creative solutions and a willingness to change.
Yeah. There's no easy answers.
There's no easy answers, that's for sure.
These are complex issues.
Complex issues.
And there's no quick fixes.
And I think it also highlights the importance of remembering the human stories behind all of these headlines.
Right, the people who are actually affected by these events.
Exactly. We talked about the people in Galicia dealing with the aftermath of the storm, the healthcare workers who are facing so much uncertainty, the everyday citizens who are trying to make sense of the political climate.
Those are the voices that we need to hear.
We do. So as we wrap up our deep dive here, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think it's the importance of staying curious and staying engaged, even when it comes to news from other countries. I mean, Spain may seem far away to some people, but these stories reflect global trends and challenges that we all face.
That's a great point. And for those listeners who might be planning a trip to Spain soon, or maybe they're just fascinated by Spanish culture and news, I think this deep dive gives them a glimpse into what's really happening in the country.
It does.
It goes beyond the tourist brochures and the stereotypes.
It shows that Spain is a living, breathing place full of contradictions and complexities.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. Well said. So, to all our listeners out there, stay tuned, stay informed, and keep exploring.
Adios.